He didn't even look at me when he said it. My father was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes somewhere past my shoulder, like I was already gone. My mother sat at the table with her hands folded in her lap, perfectly still. She'd been crying before I walked in. I could tell by the pink rims of her eyes, but she'd stopped by the time I told them. Like she'd used up whatever grief she had for me, and there was nothing left. "You're not doing this under our roof," my father said. I was 28 years old. I was a licensed physical therapist. I had student loans and a car payment, and a savings account I'd built dollar by dollar since my first job at 19, and I stood there in the kitchen I'd grown up in, holding the news that should have been complicated, but not catastrophic, and I watched my parents decide I was no longer their daughter. "Dad, we're not discussing this." My mother finally looked at me, just once. Then she looked away. I drove around for 2 hours after that. I didn't know where to go. My apartment lease had ended 3 weeks earlier. I'd been staying with my parents temporarily while I looked for a new place. Terrible timing, I know. I've thought about that 1,000 times since. The universe has a mean sense of humor. I ended up parked outside a gas station on Route 9. Engine running, heat on full blast because it was February, and my coat was still in my childhood bedroom closet. I sat there until I stopped shaking. Then I called my younger sister. Her name is Blythe. She's 3 years younger than me, works as a middle school art teacher, lives in a 2-bedroom apartment about 40 minutes away. She answered on the second ring. "I'm in trouble," I said. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Where are you right now?" I told her. She said, "Stay there, I'm coming." She drove 40 minutes in the dark and the cold, pulled up next to my car, got out without a coat, knocked on my passenger window and climbed in. I told her everything. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest and she listened to all of it. The pregnancy, the conversation with our parents, the 2 hours of driving, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Okay, you're coming home with me tonight." "Blythe, you don't have to. I'm not asking. Get your car. Follow me." That was the night everything changed. Not the night I found out I was pregnant. Not the conversation with my parents. The night my 25-year-old sister drove 40 minutes in February to sit in a gas station parking lot with me, and then drove 40 minutes back and made me tea and put fresh sheets on her couch. I want you to understand what Blythe gave up. She had a 1-bedroom apartment. The couch she put me on was her only couch. She'd been dating someone for about 8 months. A guy actually, she never wanted me to talk about him publicly, so I won't. But that relationship didn't survive the next 6 months. Whether it was because of me or just timing, I still don't know. She's never blamed me for it, not once. She also gave up privacy, quiet, the ability to walk around her own apartment without thinking about someone else. She worked with 12-year-olds all day, came home, and helped me research birthing centers and health insurance options and what WIC actually covers. She came with me to my first OB appointment because I asked her to, and she rearranged her entire Thursday to be there. I couldn't pay her anything meaningful. I covered my share of gross and utilities as best I could, but I was also trying to save everything I could before I went out on leave. Physical therapy practices don't always have the most generous benefits. Mine had 6 weeks paid, and after that it was unpaid or nothing. I made it work, barely. My parents didn't call. Not once in those first 3 months. I checked my phone more than I want to admit in those early weeks. Old habit, waiting for someone to come to their senses. They didn't. The pregnancy was uncomplicated, which I'm still grateful for. I was tired and nauseated for about 10 weeks, and then it lifted, and I worked until 38 weeks because I needed to. My coworkers were kind about it. My supervisor was awkward but not unkind. There was a small collection for a onesie and a gift card and a card that everyone signed, and I cried in the break room about it because I wasn't expecting it, and because kindness from near strangers hits differently when you're not getting it from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The father, I'll call him what he was, which is absent. We'd been together for a little over a year. He was funny and unreliable in the small ways I'd mistaken for quirks, and when I told him about the pregnancy, he said he needed time to think. He took about 3 weeks of thinking time before he told me, by text, that he didn't think he was in a position to be a father right now. I read that text 4 times. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer, who I'd already started consulting, because I had a feeling. His name is in a court document now. That's the only place that matters. My daughter was born in September. I'll call her June because she has a June kind of face. Open, warm, curious about everything. She came into the world at 11:42 in the morning, and Blythe was in the room, and she cried harder than I did. I remember thinking, even in that moment, that I wanted to remember her face. My sister's face when she saw June for the first time. The specific way she pressed both hands over her mouth. We came home to Blythe's apartment. Blythe had bought a used bassinet and set it up in the corner of the living room, near the couch. She'd reorganized the bathroom to make space. She'd meal prepped a week of food while I was in the hospital, labeled everything with little sticky notes. I want to say, those first months were hard but beautiful. Mostly they were just hard. June didn't sleep in long stretches. I was learning everything in real time, without a mother to call, without the kind of village people talk about. Blythe helped whenever she wasn't working. When she was working, I did it alone. Some nights I sat on that couch with June on my chest and just tried to breathe. Around the 4-month mark, I got a message from my mother. Not a call, a message. It said that my father and she were not in a position to change their stance, but that they wanted me to know they were not without love for me. I read it several times, and I couldn't figure out what it meant exactly. So I put my phone down and I didn't respond. I still don't know what I would have said. When June was 7 months old, I went back to work full-time. Blythe and I had found a daycare we could afford, and I worked out a schedule with my supervisor that let me drop off and pick up consistently. It was a very tight machine, and it ran on no margin. Any small disruption, sick day, snow day, car trouble, required a full renegotiation of the week. Blythe was often the person I called when the machine broke down, Fithim. She rearranged her own schedule for me more times than I can count. The legal case moved slowly. That's the thing nobody tells you about child support. It takes time. The court dates, the documentation, the back and forth. Over a year of process before anything was resolved. And, in that whole time, the father contributed exactly nothing voluntarily. Not a phone call to ask how June was. Not a card. Nothing. When the judgment finally came through, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, and I called Blythe. The back pay figure, everything that had accumulated during the legal process, came to just over $62,000. Monthly support going forward, I said the numbers out loud, and there was a long silence on her end. Then she said, June's going to have her own room. I had been quietly looking at apartments for a few months already. 2-bedroom, reasonable commute in unit laundry if possible. A school district I felt good about. The judgment meant I could actually do it. I found a place within 6 weeks. Blythe helped me move. She drove the U-Haul because I'd never driven one and I was afraid. She parallel parked it on a narrow street on the first try like it was nothing. June had her own room for the first time. Pink walls, at her request, even at 2.5. A window that faced the courtyard, a bookshelf Blythe helped me assemble, with the books organized by color, because we both agreed that was the correct way to do it. For a while, life just was. Work, daycare, pickup, dinner, bath, bed, next day. I stopped waiting for my phone to ring with my parents' number. I stopped calculating how many months it had been. I built something, even if it was smaller and quieter than I'd imagined. It was mine. It was real. June turned 3 in September. We had a small party. Blythe, a few of my coworkers who'd become genuinely close, 2 little girls from June's daycare and their mothers, paper streamers and a grocery store cake, and June in a party hat, absolutely beside herself with joy. The following Saturday morning, I was making coffee. June was in her room, talking to her stuffed animals with great authority. I was still in my pajamas. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole, and I stood there for a long moment with my hand on the door and my heart doing something strange and complicated. My mother and father were standing on the other side. My mother was holding a small wrapped gift. My father was standing half a step behind her, which is not where he usually stands. He usually leads. He looked different. Older, yes, but also somehow smaller, like something had gone out of him. I opened the door. My mother looked at me and her face did something I hadn't seen it do in 3 years. It crumpled. Quietly, the way people cry when they're trying not to. "We didn't know if you'd open it," she said. I didn't say anything. I stepped back, which I suppose was answer enough. They came inside. My father sat on the couch, without being invited, like he needed to sit down. My mother held her purse against her stomach and looked around the apartment. The bookshelf organized by color. June's crayon drawings taped to the fridge, the photos I'd hung of Blythe and June and me in matching terrible Christmas sweaters. Then June walked out of her room. She stopped in the hallway and looked at them the way a 3-year-old looks at strangers. Openly, unguarded, a little curious. She had no idea who they were. That was the part that hit me hardest in that moment. Not anger. Just the simple fact that my daughter had never met her grandparents, and she was looking at them with nothing on her face but mild interest. My mother made a sound. I don't have a word for it. Something between a gasp and something else. My father looked at June for a long moment, then he looked at me. His jaw worked like he was trying to find something to say and couldn't locate it. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew until that morning, was that June looks almost exactly like my father's mother, my grandmother, who died when I was 17, who I adored. Same wide-set dark eyes, same way of tilting her head when she's curious about something. My father had a framed photo of his mother as a child on the wall of his study for my entire childhood, and I had thought, privately, since June was about 8 months old, that the resemblance was striking. I had never told him. I hadn't been speaking to him. He looked at June's face and I watched him understand something. Something that hit differently than words could have. She looks like, he started, he didn't finish. I said, I know. We sat for a long time. My mother asked if she could hold June, and June, socially fearless always, said yes, and climbed into her lap without ceremony. My father watched them with his hands on his knees, very still. He didn't say much. He's not someone who apologizes easily. But at one point he said quietly, "We were wrong." 3 words. I'd been waiting 3 years for 3 words. I'm not going to tell you I forgave them right there in my living room, because that wouldn't be true. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a direction you choose to walk in, slowly, with a lot of backtracking. We have a long way to go. There are things I still need from them that I haven't gotten yet, conversations we haven't had. But June had her grandparents' phone number in my phone by the time they left. And a week later, my mother came over on a Saturday afternoon and watched June so I could go to a yoga class alone. For the first time in 3 years. It was a 60-minute class. I cried for about half of it, the good kind. Blythe, for the record, knows all of this. I called her that same Saturday night and told her everything. She listened the way she always does. No interruptions, no editorializing, just there. When I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "Like I'm still figuring out what the chapter is called," I said. She laughed. "You'll know when you're done writing it." June is 3.5 now. She calls Blythe her best friend, which makes Blythe pretend to cry every single time. She's starting to ask questions about the world that I don't always know how to answer. She's brave and loud and completely herself, in a way I hope she never loses. I kept the bookshelf organized by color. I kept the crayon drawings on the fridge. And every night after June is asleep, I sit with my coffee and my quiet apartment, and I think, this is the life I built. Nobody gave it to me. I made it out of the hardest years I've ever had, with my sister's couch and my own stubbornness and the kind of love that shows up in parking lots at midnight. That's the part I want to keep.